18 months. That's how long Nora had been married to Chicago's most ruthless crime boss, and he hadn't laid a single finger on her. No warmth, no nights together. Just a diamond ring and a massive empty estate. But ghosts only ignore you until someone else knocks on their door. 548 days. Nora kept track not out of hope, but out of a cynical need to measure the exact dimensions of her confinement. She sat at the long mahogany dining table, the morning sun filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the dining room. Across from her sat Declan. They were separated by 6 feet of polished wood, a silver coffee service, and an ocean of unspoken indifference. Declan Hayes did not look like a monster, which was precisely what made him so good at being one. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, his tie neatly knotted. His dark hair was brushed back, slightly greying at the temples. He was reading the financial section of the Tribune. He hadn't looked up when she walked in. He hadn't spoken a word since he sat down 20 minutes ago. He reached for his coffee. He took a sip. He turned a page. Nora chewed her toast. It tasted like ash. Their marriage was a transaction, a piece of paper signed to merge the Gallagher territory with the Hayes syndicate. Her father got to retire with his kneecaps intact. Declan absorbed the docks on the south side. Nora got a platinum ring that felt heavier than a pair of handcuffs. She had expected brutality. She had prepared herself for a cruel, demanding husband who would enforce his marital rights and lock her in a gilded cage. She hadn't expected to be entirely, completely ignored. For 18 months, they had lived in the same sprawling suburban fortress. They slept in separate bedrooms at opposite ends of a long, sterile hallway. If they passed each other, he offered a curt nod. At public dinners, he placed a heavy, impersonal hand on the small of her back for the cameras and rival bosses, then dropped it the second the car doors closed. He didn't touch her. He didn't ask about her day. He didn't care. "I have an event tonight," Nora said. Her voice sounded loud in the quiet room, rough from disuse. Declan paused halfway through turning a page. He didn't look at her. "Take Donovan. Take the armored Lincoln. It's an art exhibition in the West Loop. An old friend from college is showing her work. I'll be out late. Take 2 men, then. Have Donovan call it in when you leave." He snapped the paper sharply, folding it over. "Pass the cream." Nora stared at him. A bitter smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. She pushed the small silver pitcher across the table. It slid to a halt an inch from his hand. "Right, of course." He poured the cream, his eyes scanning a column about municipal bonds. He didn't notice the sarcasm. He didn't notice her. She could have told him she was planning to burn the house down, and he would have told her to check the smoke alarms first. Nora stood up. The legs of her chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. Declan didn't flinch. She walked out of the dining room, her heels clicking against the marble tiles of the foyer. The house was enormous, impeccably decorated, and suffocatingly quiet. It felt like a museum. Nothing was out of place. Nothing was lived in. She was just another expensive artifact Declan had acquired and put on a shelf to gather dust. Upstairs in her suite, she walked into the walk-in closet. Rows of designer dresses hung in protective bags. Declan's accountant paid her credit card bills without question. She could buy anything she wanted, go anywhere she pleased, as long as she took the guards. It was a comfortable, empty life. She reached for a dress she hadn't worn yet. It was deep emerald silk, cut low in the back with a high, modest neckline. It clung to her hips and fell to the floor in a fluid line. It wasn't the kind of dress a ghost wore. It was a dress for someone who wanted to be seen. She spent the afternoon getting ready. She took her time. She applied her makeup with deliberate precision, choosing a dark crimson lipstick. She pinned her hair up, letting a few dark strands fall against the nape of her neck. When she looked in the mirror, she didn't see the quiet, invisible wife of Declan Hayes. She saw a 26-year-old woman who was tired of holding her breath, Downstairs, Donovan was waiting by the front door. He was a broad-shouldered man with a broken nose and eyes that missed nothing. He looked her up and down, his expression carefully neutral. "Car's ready, Mrs. Hayes." "Just Nora, Donovan, please." "Sure thing, Mrs. Hayes." She sighed, grabbing her clutch. "Let's go look at some paintings." The gallery was loud, crowded, and smelled of expensive perfume and cheap wine. It was exactly what Nora needed. She stood near a large, abstract canvas of slashed red and black oil paint, letting the noise of the room wash over her. People brushed past her, murmuring apologies. The sheer proximity of other human beings was jarring. In the Hayes estate, nobody got within 5 feet of her, unless they were serving food or opening a door. "It looks like an argument, doesn't it?" Nora turned. A man was standing next to her, staring at the painting. He was tall, wearing a tweed blazer over a dark sweater. His hair was slightly unkempt, and he had a warm, crooked smile. He looked normal. He looked like he didn't know the street price of an illegal firearm or how to dispose of a body in the river. "An argument?" Nora asked. "Yeah." He pointed at the canvas. "The red is all heat and emotion, just throwing itself at the black. But the black isn't fighting back. It's just absorbing it. It's an argument where only one person is yelling." Nora felt a strange, cold tightness in her chest. She looked back at the painting. He was exactly right. It was a perfect, agonizing representation of her marriage. "I think you're right," she said quietly. The man extended a hand. "I'm Colin. I designed the lighting for the gallery. The artist owes me a drink, but she's busy schmoozing." "Nora." She took his hand. His skin was warm, slightly rough. The contact sent a tiny shock up her arm. It had been 1.5 years since someone had touched her with anything resembling genuine warmth. She held on a second longer than was polite, then pulled away, curling her fingers into her palm. "Nice to meet you, Nora. You look like you need a refill." He gestured to her half-empty plastic cup of wine. "I wouldn't say no." For the next hour, Nora didn't think about Declan. She didn't think about the silent house. Colin was funny, self-deprecating, and fiercely intelligent. They moved through the gallery, dissecting the art, making up ridiculous backstories for the other patrons. At one point, someone bumped into Nora from behind. She stumbled forward slightly. Colin reached out, his hand catching her bare arm to steady her. His thumb brushed against her skin. "Careful," he murmured, smiling down at her. He didn't let go immediately. His hand rested lightly on her arm, a casual, comfortable weight. Nora looked up at him. She felt a flush creeping up her neck. She wasn't used to this. The casual intimacy, the eye contact. She smiled back, a real, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Thanks," she breathed. Then, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. It wasn't a sudden silence. Galleries like this never went completely silent. It was a shift in the current. The murmurs near the entrance died down. The crowd subconsciously parted, people stepping aside without realizing why they were moving. Nora felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She turned her head. Declan was standing in the archway of the gallery. He was still in his charcoal suit, but he had removed the tie, his collar unbuttoned. He stood perfectly still, his hands in his pockets. He wasn't flanked by guards. Donovan and another man were waiting outside the glass doors. Declan didn't need them inside. He commanded the space entirely on his own. His eyes locked onto Nora. More accurately, they locked onto the spot where Colin's hand was still resting on Nora's bare arm. Nora felt her stomach drop. 18 months of indifference. 18 months of him looking straight through her. Now, his gaze was a physical weight, heavy and suffocating. The sheer intensity in his dark eyes pinned her to the floor. It wasn't anger. Anger was loud. This was quiet. This was predatory. Colin, oblivious to the sudden change in the atmosphere, chuckled. Anyway, as I was saying, he squeezed her arm lightly before letting go. Declan began to walk toward them. He moved with an unhurried, deliberate grace. The crowd melted out of his path. People who didn't even know who he was instinctively stepped back, recognizing the quiet menace rolling off him in waves. Nora's breath hitched. She couldn't move. Declan stopped 2 feet away. Up close, he seemed larger, broader. The scent of his cedar aftershave cut through the stale air of the gallery. He didn't look at Colin. He kept his eyes fixed on Nora. "Nora," Declan said. His voice was low, rougher than it had been at breakfast. "Declan." Her voice trembled slightly. "What are you doing here?" "My meeting downtown ended early." He finally shifted his gaze to Colin. The look was brief, dissecting, and entirely dismissive. "Who is this?" Colin extended his hand, his friendly smile faltering just a fraction under Declan's dead-eyed stare. "Colin. I'm a friend of the artist. I was just keeping Nora company." Declan looked at Colin's outstretched hand. He didn't take it. He let the silence stretch out, thick and heavy, until Colin slowly lowered his hand, clearing his throat awkwardly. "She doesn't need keeping company," Declan said flatly. His voice didn't rise above a conversational murmur, but every syllable felt like a threat. He looked back at Nora. He reached out. For the first time in 18 months, Declan touched her. His large hand wrapped around her bare waist. His fingers were hot against the silk of her dress. The grip was firm, possessive, leaving absolutely no room for argument. He pulled her flush against his side. The sudden, overwhelming contact sent a jolt of pure adrenaline straight to her heart. Her breath caught in her throat. She could feel the solid wall of his chest against her shoulder, the heat radiating off him. "We're leaving," Declan said. It wasn't a suggestion. Nora looked at Colin, who was now taking a very deliberate step back, his eyes wide, as he finally realized exactly what kind of man he was standing in front of. "It was nice meeting you, Colin," she managed to say. Declan didn't say goodbye. He simply turned, taking Nora with him. His hand never left her waist. His grip tightened slightly as he guided her through the parting crowd, his fingers digging a fraction of an inch into the silk. Outside, the cool night air hit her face, but it did nothing to calm the frantic beating of her heart. Donovan opened the rear door of the armored Lincoln. Declan put a hand on the small of her back, not the polite, impersonal touch for the cameras, but a heavy, branding weight, and guided her inside. He climbed in after her. The heavy door slammed shut, sealing them in the dark, soundproof cabin. The car pulled away from the curb. The streetlights flashed through the tinted windows, illuminating Declan's face in brief, sharp flashes. He sat close to her. Too close. Usually he sat on the far side of the leather bench, reading emails on his phone. Now, his thigh was inches from hers. He stared straight ahead, his jaw tight. The muscle beneath his ear twitched rhythmically. Nora pressed herself against the door, her heart hammering. The silence in the car wasn't the dead, empty silence of their house. It was alive. It was the silence before a fuse hits the powder keg. "Don't ever," Declan said, his voice dropping an octave, harsh and grating in the quiet car. "Let another man touch you again." Nora turned her head, staring at his profile in the dark. The ghost was gone. The monster had finally woken up. The ride back to the estate passed in a suffocating vacuum. The tires hummed against the asphalt. Streetlights cast rhythmic, sweeping shadows across the leather interior of the Lincoln. Nora kept her back pressed firmly against the passenger door. Her pulse throbbed in her throat. She did not look at Declan. She did not need to. The heat radiating from his side of the back seat was an undeniable, physical presence. When the car finally rolled to a stop in front of the massive stone steps of their home, Donovan opened the door. Nora stepped out into the crisp night air. She expected Declan to walk past her. She expected him to head straight for the East Wing, disappearing into his soundproofed office, the way he had done for 548 consecutive nights. He did not. As soon as her heels hit the driveway, Declan's hand clamped around her wrist. The grip was tight, not bruising, but entirely unyielding. "Inside," he said. Donovan looked away, focusing intently on the gravel under his boots. The front door swung open. A terrified-looking housekeeper scurried out of the foyer, disappearing down the servants' hall before they even crossed the threshold. Declan did not let go. He pulled Nora through the marble entryway, his long strides forcing her to practically jog to keep up. They bypassed the grand staircase. They bypassed the formal living room. He towed her directly into his private study. He kicked the heavy oak door shut behind them. The lock clicked with a sharp, final sound. The study was dark, smelling faintly of old paper and expensive scotch. The only illumination came from a single brass lamp on his mahogany desk. Declan released her wrist. He walked over to a crystal decanter, poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into a glass, and downed it in one fluid motion. He set the glass down hard. The crystal clinked sharply against the wood. Nora stood by the door, rubbing her wrist. Her skin burned where his fingers had been. She forced herself to breathe evenly. "Are you out of your mind?" Nora asked. Her voice shook, but she refused to step back. "You humiliated me. You humiliated him." Declan turned slowly. He leaned back against the edge of his desk, crossing his arms over his chest. His suit jacket stretched tight across his shoulders. He looked at her with a terrifying, blank expression. "I kept you alive," he said. "Alive?" Nora let out a harsh, incredulous laugh. "Is that what you call this? You dragged me out of an art gallery like I was a piece of stolen property because a man, a completely harmless lighting designer, touched my arm. For 3 seconds. He touched what is mine." The words hit the quiet room like a physical blow. Nora stared at him, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "Yours," she repeated bitterly. "I am a signature on a contract, Declan. I am a peace treaty between you and my father. You haven't looked at me in 18 months. You haven't spoken to me unless it was to tell me which car to take. You don't get to play the jealous husband now." Declan's jaw clenched. The muscle fluttered wildly beneath his skin. He pushed off the desk and closed the distance between them in 3 long strides. Nora gasped, pressing her back against the solid oak of the locked door. He stopped mere inches from her. He braced both hands against the wood on either side of her head, caging her in completely. He was so close she could feel the heat of his skin, smell the sharp bite of the scotch on his breath. "You think this has been easy?" he demanded, his voice dropping to a dangerous, vibrating whisper. "You think ignoring you in this massive, empty house has been easy?" Nora swallowed hard. She looked up into his eyes. They were completely black in the dim light. "You made the rules?" she whispered. "I made a boundary," he corrected harshly. "You are a Gallagher. Your father is a snake who would slit my throat if he thought he could get away with it. I married you to secure the South Docks. That was the deal. I brought you into my house, and I swore to myself I would not touch you. I swore I would keep the business and the marriage entirely separate." "Why?" "Because if I touched you," Declan said, his voice cracking slightly, "I knew I wouldn't stop. I knew I would tear this house apart to keep you. In our world, Nora, attachments are liabilities. The moment someone knows what you care about, they put a bullet in it." He leaned closer. His nose brushed against hers. Nora stopped breathing entirely. "I kept my distance to keep my head clear," he murmured, his eyes dropping to her lips. "I watched you every single day. I watched you sit at my table. I watched you walk through my halls. I watched you put on that green dress today, and I spent the entire afternoon wanting to rip it off you." Nora's hands trembled. She slowly raised them, pressing her palms flat against his chest. His heart was hammering violently against her fingers. It was a chaotic, entirely human rhythm. "Then why come to the gallery?" she asked softly. "Because Donovan called. He said a man was buying you drinks. He said you were smiling." Declan's face twisted with a dark, territorial fury. "I lost my goddamn mind, Nora. 18 months of discipline evaporated in 10 seconds. When I walked in and saw his hand on your skin, I wanted to kill him. I wanted to break every finger on his hand." He brought his hand up, cupping her jaw. His thumb dragged slowly across her cheekbone. It was a rough, calloused touch, desperate and possessing. "You are my wife," he breathed, his forehead resting against hers. "You wear my ring. You sleep under my roof. I don't care about the contract anymore. I don't care about the docks. No one else touches you. Ever." Nora looked at him. The cynical, quiet woman she had been for the last year and a half fractured completely. She didn't want the silence anymore. She wanted the fire. She curled her fingers into the lapels of his suit jacket and pulled him down. Declan groaned, a deep, guttural sound that tore through the quiet room. His mouth crashed down on hers. There was nothing gentle about it. It was a collision of teeth and heat, 18 months of repressed frustration and raw, violent hunger exploding all at once. He tasted like scotch and control breaking at the seams. Nora kissed him back with equal desperation. She arched up on her toes, her hand sliding into his dark hair, gripping the strands tightly. Declan wrapped his arms around her waist, lifting her entirely off the floor. He spun them around, slamming her back against the edge of the mahogany desk. Papers scattered across the floor. A brass pen holder clattered to the ground. Neither of them cared. He swept a heavy arm across the desktop, clearing a space. He set her down on the polished wood, stepping between her thighs. His hands were everywhere, tracing the curve of her waist, gripping her hips, sliding up the silk of her dress. "Mine," he muttered against her throat, his teeth scraping over her pulse point. "Say it." Nora threw her head back, gasping as his mouth moved to her collarbone. "Yours," she breathed into the dark. "Only yours." The museum was finally closed. The artifact was broken. In its place was a very real, very dangerous reality. The morning sun was brutally bright. It poured through the massive windows of the master bedroom, illuminating the tangled mess of the sheets. Nora woke up slowly. Her body ached in a deep, unfamiliar, and entirely satisfying way. She reached out across the king-sized mattress. The sheets were empty, but the pillow beside hers was still warm. She pulled it toward her, burying her face in the fabric. It smelled like cedar and him. She sat up, pulling the heavy duvet around her shoulders. She looked around the room. She had never been in Declan's bedroom before last night. It was sparsely decorated, utilitarian, and cold. Or at least, it had been. Now, her emerald silk dress lay in a discarded heap on the floor near the doorway. Declan's suit jacket was thrown carelessly over a leather armchair. The pristine, untouched order of his life had been thoroughly disrupted. The bedroom door clicked open. Declan walked in. He was wearing dark slacks and a crisp white button-down shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his forearms. He held a ceramic mug of coffee in one hand. He stopped at the foot of the bed, looking at her. The frantic, desperate energy of last night was gone, replaced by a steady, calculating calm. But the coldness was completely eradicated. When he looked at her now, he actually saw her. He walked around the bed and handed her the coffee. "Black," he said. "No sugar." Nora took the mug. "You remembered." "I notice everything about you, Nora. I always have." He sat on the edge of the mattress, resting his arms on his knees. He looked down at his hands. "My men are clearing out the West Wing today. Your clothes are being moved in here." Nora took a sip of the bitter coffee. "Are they?" Declan looked up, his dark eyes locked onto hers. Yes, the separate bedrooms are done. The polite distance is done. You are my wife. You will live like my wife. Nora set the mug down on the bedside table. She tightened her grip on the duvet. And what does that mean, exactly? Am I just a different kind of prisoner now? Moved from a cell down the hall to the warden's bed? Declan's expression hardened slightly. You are not a prisoner. I can't leave the house without armed guards. I have no access to the accounts. I don't know anything about the organization that dictates whether I live or die. If I am your wife, Declan, I am not going to be a pet you keep locked in the master suite. He studied her for a long moment. He didn't look angry. He looked intrigued. What do you want? He asked quietly. I want in, Nora said. She didn't flinch. She kept her voice completely level. If I am wearing your name, and if I am sharing your bed, I am sharing the risk. I know my father's operation. I know the shipping schedules on the South Docks better than his own lieutenants do. You merged the territories on paper, but half his men still don't respect you. I can fix that. Declan sat perfectly still. The silence stretched between them, but it wasn't the dead silence of the dining room table. It was the silence of two predators evaluating each other. It's dangerous, he finally said. Being married to you is dangerous, Nora countered. Sitting blindly in a mansion, waiting for a rival cartel to blow up my car, is dangerous. I would rather see the bullet coming. A slow, dark smile spread across Declan's face. It was a terrifying smile, full of sharp edges and genuine respect. He reached out, sliding his hand behind her neck, his thumb resting over her pulse point. You're a ruthless woman, Nora. I'm a Gallagher, she said. And a Hayes. You don't survive being both by playing nice. Declan leaned in and kissed her. It was a slow, deliberate kiss, completely devoid of the panic from the night before. It was a seal, a contract signed in blood and breath. Get dressed, he murmured against her lips. I have a meeting at 10 with the dock foreman. You're coming with me. He stood up and walked toward the bathroom. Nora watched him go, a small, triumphant smile playing on her lips. An hour later, they walked down the grand staircase together. Donovan was waiting by the front door. He looked up, his eyes briefly flicking from Declan to Nora, then back to the floor. He noted the change immediately. They were no longer walking 6 feet apart. Declan's hand rested firmly on the small of her back. The air around them crackled with an unspoken, dangerous authority. Car is ready, boss, Donovan said. Mrs. Hayes. Just Nora, Donovan, she replied, her voice smooth and confident. Sure thing, Nora, Donovan nodded, a faint trace of a smirk appearing on his battered face. They stepped out into the morning sunlight. The armored Lincoln was waiting, the engine idling with a low, powerful rumble. Declan opened the door for her himself. As she slid into the leather seat, he leaned down, his face inches from hers. We take the South Docks today, Declan said softly, his eyes dark and hungry. And tonight, we take everything else. Nora looked up at her husband. The ghost was entirely dead. The monster was awake, and surprisingly, she found she liked the monster very much. They were plunging into a world of violence, deceit, and blood. But for the first time in 18 months, Nora was not alone in the dark. She smiled, her crimson lipstick sharp against her pale skin. Drive, she said. The heavy door slammed shut. The Lincoln pulled away from the estate, rolling smoothly toward the city skyline. Behind them, the massive house stood empty, its museum-like quiet finally shattered for good. They were going to war, and they were going together. The transaction had ended. The syndicate had begun. Everything had changed in a single night, born from a single, fleeting touch of jealousy that burned their cold world entirely to the ground. Did Nora make the right choice, stepping out of the shadows and into Declan's dangerous world? Or is she playing a game she can't win? Their cold marriage just went up in flames, and the real war for Chicago's underworld is only just beginning. If you loved this dark, slow-burn mafia romance, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with your friends.